ICC Utility 1.0. In today's demo, we'll discuss about ICC Utility. We'll talk about few capabilities of this tool, such as automating your code review process, documenting your Power Center code, both mapping and workflow, generating code migration checklist, and finally a demo on this utility. So ICC stands for Integration Competency Center. The main goal of ICC Utility is to streamline some of the labor-intensive tasks in a typical ETL environment. Shown in this slide is some of the core feature of this utility. For ETL lead, this tool will speed up your code review process by automating majority of the steps typically performed during a code review. It will ensure naming convention, make sure there are comments in your code, make sure the debugging options are turned off. For an ETL developer, this tool helps by documenting both workflow and mapping in a nice HTML report. For an ETL manager, this tool helps by providing memory requirement for a workflow. And then finally, for Informatica administrator, this tool basically provides a consistent way of receiving code migration request. It's a nice code migration checklist produced by this utility. Now ICC is a command line tool which performs following steps in a sequential manner. Step 1 is to extract Power Center code from Power Center repository. Step 2 is to convert that code into a normalized XML format. Now there are advantages of doing this, and it's been explained in detail in the user guide. Step 3 is to document your Power Center mapping and workflow in a nice HTML report. Step 4 is to perform your automated code review using a predefined template, and that's discussed in next few slides. Step 5 is to document session memory properties, and then step 6 is to generate migration checklist. Syntax of running this ICC utility is as shown in this slide. It's a batch file. Currently it's a batch file, a Windows batch file. It accepts two parameters. The first one is your Power Center folder name, and the second one is your workflow name. Talking about some of the core feature, this automated code review is one of the main feature about this tool. This tool will perform checks and report any failure if any of these conditions don't match. Now these conditions are basically dictated based on the template that you can predefine and link it to this particular utility. So it will report transformation. It will report failure in a nice HTML report if your transformation prefix does not match your naming convention, if your transformation name is not a camel case, if description is missing from your transformation. Similarly, for variables, it will make sure your local variable starts with v underscore, and if it does not start with v underscore prefix, it will get reported in your final report. So these are some of the other checks that it will perform on your variables. Similarly, it will perform tracing level check. This is one of the main problem when you migrate code from dev to test environment. If a developer forgets to remove the tracing level and don't convert them back to normal, then you have repercussions when running that code in test and prod environment. So this utility will automatically go and list out places where the tracing level is not set to the default option, which is normal. And then similarly, it will check for comments and make sure there are comments in your workflow and mapping. Talking about the predefined template for this code review process, this is a typical format. There is a configuration file in one of the folders that allows you to fine tune some of these uh, options based on your environment. In this example here, you would see that there are all the different transformations that you typically use in your Power Center Designer, uh, and it will tell you what the transformation is along with the description and what the naming convention is being used. So in this case, we're looking at the aggregator and we say AGG underscore is the prefix that we want to use for our transformation. So you can change this configuration file depending if you have a different naming convention at your location. Similarly, you have an option of disabling code review for any given transformation, whether it's a workflow, session, transformation. Now this is a review report that is published at the end of it by going through your code. In this document, it's a HTML report. In this you will see all the mappings along with the transformation below your mapping and so on, and places where the tool found anomalies will be shown up in this nice HTML report. It will show you, for any transformation where descriptions are missing, it will highlight them. If your naming convention does not match with what a developer has defined for their particular transformation, it will be highlighted here. Similarly, if you're using slightly different variation of when defining your output variable, those kind of things will be highlighted in this final report. Now in next few slides we'll go through some of the other HTML reports that are published by this tool. This is documenting your workflow. In this you would see all the options that are typically linked with your workflow. All the different attributes will be shown up in a nice HTML report. So it will go through your folder and in each. Similarly for mapping, this will go through all the mappings based on the workflow. So the workflow is the high level parent. Within that you'll have multiple sessions. Each session is linked to the mapping. So depending on however mappings you have associated with that workflow, they all will get documented in a nice HTML report along with any reusable transformation maplets, and all the values associated with that transformation will be shown up in a nice HTML report here. This is another report that documents your memory settings. So it will go through your session and look at all the different transformation you have in your mapping, and it will calculate all the bytes, and based on Informatica formula of creating session buffer block and DTM buffer size, it will go and produce this nice report that can be used by a ETL manager to do capacity planning. This is another output from the tool. It will automatically go through, look at all the different sources, target, and different connections that you have in your particular workflow, and it will produce this nice HTML report listing out all the different options that needs to be migrated from one environment to the other. Particular example CP folder and this workflow, and let's see what kind of report this tool will produce. So like mentioned in the presentation, that the command is ICC Utility CEP, which is the folder name, and then this particular workflow name WF underscore S underscore M underscore flow 1. When you press enter, this tool will go ahead and connect to the repository, extract your code, converts that to a normalized XML, generate your Power Center mapping, does your code review, prints out the memory settings, and it will create all these files in your output folder. So let's quickly hop onto the output folder. You would see that for each workflow it has generated these files, and depending on the suffix of the document, it will show you what kind of document is it. So if you open the first document, it will show you the folder name, all the sources that are there defined in this CEP folder that is linked to the workflow, and the mapping will be documented here. You would see all the properties along with any value that has been modified. It will show you the port name along with the port precision type, and in case of XML document, it will show you the XPath and some of the default values. So depending on what type of source you have, you would see slightly different attributes, the way you see that in your mapping designer. Then it will go through and document all the mappings that are linked with the workflow. In this case, we are seeing that there is no description that is being defined for this workflow. This is a valid workflow. The total port size is this. It goes through all the ports and it does that calculation for you. Similarly, all the transformation will be listed out here in this nice HTML report. Now, one good thing to see is, like in an expression, it will show you the output expression. So depending on what type of port you have, output will be displayed in a different color. If it's a local variable, it will be displayed in a different color. If it's input output, in that case, you don't modify the values, so those will be displayed in a different color. Let's move on to the workflow document. This will document all the properties that are associated with the workflow. In this case, we are seeing that the name of the workflow is wf_s_m_workflow1. This is my log name, this is the log directory, and the one that you're seeing in blue color is the modified value. Similarly, it's going to tell me what my mapping name is along with the description if there was one for the mapping, and then some of the other details. Now, I was talking about these different tabs. This is how you see that in Workflow Manager, and so those tabs will be shown in the same area in this report. Connection information will be shown under connection section along with the target information. In this case, it's a JMS connection, so you're seeing some of these attributes that are defined when you're defining a JMS connection. The source to this is a file, so it tells you the source directory along with the source file name, and so on. Now let's move on to the review and code review, and let's see what it came up with. So it saw that we don't have description at many places. We are not following the naming convention. So exp trans, it should basically start with exp underscore and then the actual transformation name. This is defined as the output port, whereas the name really does not start with O underscore as the prefix. So if there were differences in the workflow, let's say if the debugging option was turned on and things like that, those things will get highlighted in this report. Similarly, we have other documents that are published. This has been nicely documented along with some of the screenshot in the user guide. So when you go through this user guide, it will show you exactly different options, how to run the tool, how to modify this configuration file, and with detail. It talks about different transformation, and will show you some of the screenshots that are associated with each transformation. With that, we'll conclude this demo. Thanks a lot.